Welcome back. 11:41 Eastern Standard Time. The race in Virginia still too close to call, but it does appear that Glenn Youngkin, the Republican, will be the next governor of Virginia. We continue to watch that. Also, we're watching an interesting ballot initiative unfolding in Motown in Detroit. It is called Proposition R, and R in this case deals with reparations. 81% of the people there saying yes, that they want the city of Detroit to study the issue of reparations. Our experts are back with us. Aisha, I'll begin with you. My question on the issue of reparations is always this: why do we continue to study reparations? It is the most studied issue in the world. It's either pay or don't pay. But do we still need another study?
That's exactly what I was going to say, Dale. I mean, this is the controversy here. We know that we owed some reparations. The question becomes, instead of studying it on like a yes or no question, this commission is intended to actually make real recommendations about what reparations might look like, right? In what areas could there be some reconciliation, might get paid what, how there might be housing subsidies, whatever it is that they come up with is supposed to be solution oriented. So I'm hopeful that that actually moves the conversation forward. The bill that is in the House, that the House actually passed and is languishing over at the Senate, has, a lot of controversy around it, around do we need another federal commission to study something? Let's hope that Detroit can actually be a model of what happens when a commission comes together and makes recommendations that the administration is willing to accept and move forward on. This could be the blueprint for how we get this done in America.
Mr. Simon, is out on the West Coast, by the way. We are still in the issue of trying to get voting rights again. Motown is talking about Proposition R on reparations. Your thoughts on why we continue to study this issue if at the end of the day, is anybody going to get a check?
I think we're studying it because there's not strong public support. We have a state reparations commission here in California. It was appointed by Governor Newsom and the legislature, yet Prop 16 lost, which was an effort to try to reinstitute affirmative action. So some of these people of color who call themselves allies in these minority states, when it comes to an actual check being cut, we often do not see the same level of commitment. But I will say that much of it is education, because so many people in this country have no connectivity with slavery and the enslaved, particularly those who have migrated here in the last 100 years. And I think these commissions do serve the purpose of laying out the case and explaining why America, you can repatriate Afghans, you can repatriate families that have been separated at the border. You can have a Marshall Plan in Europe. You can repatriate Iraqis. You can have all of these efforts to repatriate, but the people that built this country, you find to be absurd. So I do think these commissions are an opportunity to properly educate those who may not understand why this country should support reparations. And by the way, the entire West, we have those that are Haiti and the relationship with France, Jamaica, and Britain. Now, those may not be our issues to vote on, but I think reparations for the Middle Passage, the slave trade throughout the diaspora is not just an American issue. I believe it is a Western and global issue.
But Charles, I'll push back on what Mr. Simon just said and point to the fact that we saw America lay out in two different international crises, one in Afghanistan and one in Haiti. The Afghanistans were welcomed into Dulles International Airport and resettled in places in Virginia, Texas, and Arizona. The Haitians were met with men on horses using their reins as whips and sent back to Haiti after an earthquake, after a presidential assassination, and after a hurricane. This issue of reparations and not wanting to pay in America is as simple as black and white.
I think that's true, but I think the Detroit issue is even more complicated because, it shows how complicated reparations can get when you push it down from the federal level to more local levels. Detroit is a 75% black city. The idea of reparation is the people who did the harm, or the institution that did the harm, the government that did the harm, does the paying. If Detroit pays anything, it's going to be black people's money paying other black people. That's not the way it's supposed to work. That is not reparative if I'm taking black money to pay other black people. And Detroit is not flush with cash. It wasn't that long ago that Detroit was almost bankrupt, and they were entertaining the idea of selling off Belle Isle, which is a park that's in the middle of the river, or selling off the actual art from the amazing Detroit Museum. These were real considerations in the city. There is no money. So where would the money come from to pay reparations other than out of the taxes that black people pay? So it's just a very complicated idea, and it really speaks to the fact that what we need in this country is federal reparations, which are much more stable and make much more sense than local reparations, particularly when you get to an overwhelmingly majority black city.
Aisha, you know who is not going to vote for federal reparations? Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin doesn't even want to write a check for paid family leave. So what makes us think that absent the end of the filibuster, which Manchin doesn't want to get rid of, which Kyrsten Sinema doesn't want to get rid of, which Joe Biden wants to get rid of, Detroit can pass all of the reparation studies that they want to, and as Charles says, yes, you're right, it will be black people paying black people, but when it comes to the federal government writing a check for African Americans and what we went through, what our ancestors went through in this country, ain't gonna happen.
It's not, and we talk about Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema because they're taking up way too much oxygen in the room, because they have been the ones who've been courageously saying, no, I'm not doing that. The reality is that there are some Democrats in the Senate who have been pretty quiet around the filibuster and a variety of issues, who are just thankful that Manchin and Kyrsten are taking all the blows for them so that they don't have to raise their hand and say, I'm against all those things too. I don't think that it's just the two of them who would hold up reparations. There are a lot of white people in Congress, frankly, who aren't there yet, and everyone will hide behind this spending mechanism. What are we going to do? Where are we going to get the money from? Who's going to get the money? How do we distribute it, right? It's complicated, is what everyone would say. People are afraid to study it because people have been considering these issues for years, and it may not be as complicated to execute as we all want to believe, and I think that people aren't willing to face that.
Mr. Simon, I am not great at quoting biblical scripture, but I do know there is this phrase that says, ask not, get not. Is the issue of reparations, does it boil down to the fact that black people just don't demand it? We ask about it, we say, please study it. We say, you know, almost like, what is it, Oliver Twist, more soup, please? We don't really demand reparations. Right now, even if you take Virginia, they're almost afraid to even talk about the institution of slavery.
You know, Dick Gregory once said that if you could figure out how to get attorney's fees for reparations, it would be passed overnight. It is an issue of who's paying and who gets paid. And I do think that it will take creativity for the proper financial mechanisms. But it is something that this nation has to face. What George W. Bush called was this nation's great sin. It's staying. And if we do not, for whatever reasons, we will continue to see the division, the hatred, and all of the problems that we're having as a society. We need spokespeople that can talk to the other side and explain to them why they have a vested stake in supporting those who built this country. And I think, unfortunately, the dialogue is not inclusive. It is actually more exclusive and in many cases dividing. But I remain an optimist. I believe one day this nation is going to have to come to the reckoning that they have to address the enslaved, and that is going to be a financial address.
I saw a gentleman interviewed in a documentary just 2 nights ago that said, none of my ancestors owned slaves, and in fact, the slaves around here were treated quite nice. That is the attitude that you deal with every time you bring up the issue of reparations, enslaved people, 1619, critical race theory, which was not a critical race theory at all, etc.